Imagine this. The main water source for nearly 500,000 people just suddenly turning a toxic, vibrant green. Now, this isn't some sci-fi movie plot. It actually happened in 2023 at the UK's largest freshwater lake. And, the story of what went wrong there is a huge warning sign for all of us about the water we so often take for granted. So you have to wonder, right? How on earth does that even happen? How does a massive, vital lake go from being a source of life to something that looks like it's been filled with neon paint? Well, that's the big question we're gonna unpack right now. And just so we're all clear on the stakes here, we're talking about Lough Neagh. This isn't just any old lake. It supplies drinking water to 40% of the entire population of Northern Ireland. So yeah, when something goes this wrong here, it's an immediate crisis for hundreds of thousands of people. Okay, so keeping those incredibly high stakes in mind, let's zoom in and look at what exactly happened in 2023 that turned this crucial water source into, well, the UK's Green Lake. So in 2023, the lake got hit with something truly shocking. One of the worst algal blooms ever recorded there. I mean, huge stretches of this massive body of water turned into this thick, almost surreal bright green soup. And while the pictures are pretty wild, the real crisis was what was brewing just beneath the surface. To really get our heads around how a lake can get this sick, we need to talk about the science behind it. And it all boils down to this one key process. That process is called eutrophication. I know, it's a mouthful, sounds super complicated, but the idea is actually pretty simple. It's what happens when water gets overloaded with nutrients. Think of those nutrients as a super fertilizer, and they kick off this explosive, totally out-of-control growth of plant life, like that algae we just saw. So it's basically a 5-step chain reaction to ecological disaster. It all starts when way too many nutrients, think nitrates and phosphates, pour into the water. The algae have an all-you-can-eat buffet, right? They bloom so fast they create this thick green blanket on the surface, which blocks all the sunlight, killing off the plants below. But here's the real killer move. When all that algae eventually dies and sinks to the bottom, the bacteria that decompose it suck all the oxygen out of the water. They literally suffocate the lake, killing fish and pretty much everything else. Which, of course, raises the big question, where in the world did all of these lake-killing nutrients come from in the first place? Let's trace them back to the source. Well, the evidence points to two main culprits. First up, you've got agricultural runoff. The land all around Lough Neagh is used for really intensive farming, so every time it rains, all the fertilizers and animal waste, which are packed with those nitrates and phosphates, just wash right into the rivers that feed the lake. And then second, there's sewage pollution. And this is a much wider issue across the UK, where treated and sometimes only partially treated, sewage gets discharged into waterways, adding another massive dose of nutrients into the whole system. So this overload of nutrients from farms and from sewage, it sets off this absolutely devastating domino effect. And the consequences? Well, they go way beyond just changing the water's color. The environmental damage is, frankly, catastrophic. You get these oxygen-depleted dead zones that lead to massive fish kills and a total collapse in biodiversity. But it gets even worse. Some types of this algae, it's actually a bacteria called cyanobacteria. They produce their own powerful toxins, making the water straight up dangerous for wildlife, for pets, and yeah, even for people. And of course, the problem doesn't just stop at the water's edge. This has huge knock-on effects for people. The water becomes unsafe to drink without much more difficult and expensive treatment. Things like swimming or boating, forget about it. The local fishing industry gets hammered by the collapsing fish stocks, and tourism takes a nosedive. I mean, who wants to go on vacation next to a hazardous lake? Look, while the story of Lough Neagh is a local crisis, it's also a major warning sign. It's got global implications, and it's a warning we all really need to start listening to. This right here gets to the absolute heart of the matter. We usually think of water insecurity as a problem of quantity, droughts, not having enough water. But what Lough Neagh proves is that you can be surrounded by water and still face a crisis if that water becomes too polluted to actually use. And let's be perfectly clear, this is not just a problem for Northern Ireland. Lough Neagh is a flashing red light, an example of an issue that's facing a ton of wealthy, supposedly water-rich nations. We might have plenty of rain and full reservoirs, but what good is that if we're actively making our own water unusable through pollution? It's a self-inflicted crisis of quality, not quantity. And all of this forces us to ask one last, really crucial question. We spend so much time and energy worrying about running out of water, but what if the real creeping crisis isn't a lack of water, but a lack of clean water? That is the urgent warning from the lake that turned green. And honestly, it's a question we can't afford to ignore anymore.